Attention survivors, this is your weekly broadcast on the pandemic. The grinning plague, a devastating pandemic caused by the neuroparasite known as cerebrum smilovirus, has swept across the globe, leaving destruction in its bus. This terrifying disease attacks the brain, causing grotesque physical changes and behavioral transformations that are beyond comprehension. At first, the symptoms may seem like a common viral infection: fever, chills, and general fatigue. However, within a mere 48 hours, the infected begin to exhibit more sinister signs. The most disturbing symptom is a perpetual smile, a permanent, chilling grin that cannot be controlled by the infected. This unnerving expression is a result of the parasite manipulating the facial nerves and muscles. As cerebrum smilovirus spreads throughout the brain, it alters neural pathways to drive individuals towards acts of extreme violence and cruelty. Infected individuals become ruthless and show no mercy as they are driven by the parasite to inflict pain and destruction on those who are uninfected. Transmission occurs primarily through bodily fluids, such as close contact or the exchange of blood or saliva. In some cases, contaminated surfaces can also pose a threat, although less frequently. Once inside the body, the parasite travels through the bloodstream to the brain, where it infiltrates critical areas such as the limbic system and prefrontal cortex. It takes control over emotional responses and moral judgment, turning infected individuals into merciless predators. Tune in every Wednesday at 19 cook hours for updates and information. Stay vigilant, stay safe, and may God bless us all.
The harsh snap of the radio knob shattered the room's peace, leaving only a deafening silence in its wake. Rye's body remained rigid and unmoving, as if frozen in time, his head bowed low and his eyes hidden behind a curtain of dark hair. The hood of his black jumper cast a deep shadow over his face, adding to the already ominous atmosphere. A heavy sigh escaped his lips, tinged with resignation and a hint of despair.
May God bless us.
His voice was a low growl laced with bitter resentment.
If there even is a God.
The words lingered in the air, heavy with the weight of doubt and despair. Rye's gaze hardened as he turned to face his reflection in a shattered window. The glass, sharp and jagged, offered a distorted view of his battle-worn appearance. He wore tactical black pants, the fabric taut over muscles honed from a life of danger. A security identification tag hung from his waistband, a reminder of his past as a security guard. His attire was completed by a black jumper that blended into the shadows, paired with sturdy boots made for traversing treacherous terrain. The marks of his struggles were etched onto his weathered face, an X-shaped scar on his left cheek and scruffy beard adding to the ruggedness of his features. Jet black hair buzzed at the sides framed a countenance that exuded defiance and resilience. Intricate tattoos adorned his neck like battle scars, telling tales of courage and sacrifice. Each symbol is a testament to deeper meanings and battles fought. A dragon coiled proudly on the left side of his neck, its scales seeming to shimmer with mythical prowess. Opposite, the helm of awe was etched boldly into his skin, a symbol of protection and courage in the face of adversity. On the right side of his skull, Odin's raven perched stoically, its piercing eyes mirroring the wisdom and cunning of the ancient Norse deity. Together, these marks painted a portrait of a man who had navigated the realms of both darkness and light, each tattoo and scar a narrative woven into the fabric of his identity. Rye rested his hands on his knees, his gaze fixed on the table before him. The room was bathed in a flickering dimness, the only illumination coming from the flickering candles scattered around. Outside, the city retained its electricity, but any sound could be deadly. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from outside the house, causing Rye's heart to leap into a frantic rhythm. He swallowed hard, the tension in the room palpable. Slowly, he rose to his feet, every movement cautious and deliberate. With careful steps, Rye approached the window, his pulse pounding in his ears. He reached out, gingerly pulling aside the curtain, straining to see without making a sound. His eyes widened in horror as he peered through the gap. Down the street, a man sprinted desperately, his cries for help piercing the night air. The man's panicked voice cut through the night, desperate and pleading for salvation.
Help! Please, someone help me!
His words were strained, carrying a raw intensity born of sheer terror.
They're coming for me! They won't stop!
Each syllable echoed with fear, his voice cracking as he sprinted, the sound of his footsteps a frantic rhythm against the pavement. Behind him, 3 figures moved with unnatural speed, their faces contorted into grotesque, permanent smiles, the telltale mark of the grinners. Rye's breath caught in his throat as he watched the harrowing scene unfold from the safety of his darkened room. The man's pleas for help reverberated through the quiet street, unanswered by any other soul in the vicinity. Outside, the grinners closed in on their prey with unnerving speed, their twisted smiles visible even from the distance. Their movements were erratic yet purposeful, driven by an insatiable urge for violence that chilled Rye to the core. The man stumbled, his frantic sprint slowing as exhaustion and fear threatened to overwhelm him. His eyes darted wildly, seeking an escape that seemed increasingly elusive. With each passing moment, the gap between him and his pursuers narrowed. A surge of adrenaline coursed through Rye's veins, battling with the instinct to remain hidden. He knew he couldn't stand idly by. In the critical calculus of survival, Rye understood that heroics were a luxury he couldn't afford. His breath caught in his throat as he wrestled with the instinct to remain hidden, knowing it was his best chance to evade the grinners prowling outside. The man, his face a mask of terror, glanced to his left and locked eyes with Rye. Desperation and fear etched deep lines into his features as he sprinted toward Rye, a silent plea for salvation in his gaze.
Please help me!
The man's voice cracked with desperation, his words echoing in the stillness of the night. Rye hesitated, torn between compassion and self-preservation.
I can't,
he whispered hoarsely, his voice barely audible over the pounding of his heart.
It's too dangerous. They know you are here.
The man's expression twisted with anguish, his footsteps faltering as he realized Rye's decision.
No, please.
Terror gripped Rye's chest as he watched the man's hope fade. He clenched his fists, fighting the urge to rush to the door and intervene. The sound of the grinners drawing closer sent a shiver down his spine, a grim reminder of the peril lurking just outside. The few seconds that passed felt like agonizing hours. Rye's heartbeat thundered in his ears as he watched the scene unfold in slow motion. The man's desperate eyes turned from pleading to pure rage. Losing all hope, he rushed to the window, pounding on the glass with frantic fists.
Open the fucking door, you fucking asshole! I'll fucking kill you!
The man screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria and desperation. The echoes of his shouts reverberated through the night, amplifying the terror in his voice. Rye recoiled, his body tense, torn between fear and guilt.
Please, just go. They'll hear you,
he pleaded, though his voice was choked with dread, barely audible above the man's panicked cries. The man's fists continued to batter the window, his anger morphing into sheer panic as the grinners arrived behind him. Their eerie, grotesque smiles were stretched impossibly wide, etched into their skin like ghastly masks. They began tilting their heads, each movement slow and deliberate, their eyes locked on the man.
No, please!
The man's voice broke as he turned to face his pursuers, his back pressed against the window, eyes wide with terror. The grinners advanced with unnerving calm, their footsteps slow and measured. They moved with a sadistic purpose, savoring the fear they instilled in their victim. Rye's breath hitched as he saw them draw closer, their twisted smiles gleaming in the dim light, promising the horrific pain they were about to unleash. Rye's stomach churned with helplessness as he witnessed the scene, the man's final pleas mingling with the sinister approach of the grinners.
Oh God, no.
The man turned back to face Rye, desperation etched deeply into his features. His palms slapped against the glass, the barrier now feeling unbearably thin. His eyes, wide and pleading, met Rye's through the dim light.
Please, mister, I'm sorry. Don't let them hurt me. Please, I'm begging you, please.
He implored, his voice breaking. Tears welled in his eyes, sliding down his cheeks, mingling with the dirt and sweat. His fingers pressed hard against the glass, as if trying to break through it by sheer will. Behind him, the grinners loomed closer, their unnerving smiles fixed in place. One of them seized the man by the back of his neck, yanking him away from the window with a cruel, jerking motion. His hand slipped down the glass, leaving smeared trails as he was dragged across the rough pavement, his screams slicing through the night air. Rye's heart pounded against his ribs, every fiber of his being screaming to intervene, but he remained rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear and helplessness. The grinners encircled the man, their movements deliberate, savoring the terror they had instilled. Their heads turned in unison, eyes locking onto Rye with an unsettling intelligence. His blood ran cold as he stared back, his face betraying a mix of fear and defiance. He forced himself to stand tall, attempting to mask his terror with a facade of bravery. He knew they were not mindless. They could think, plan, and react. His silence was a fragile shield, a desperate hope that they might move on if he didn't provoke them.